Character-coded game design is the term I use in reference to games that are conceived around the creation of a core character that all game design elements are centered on. This is a bit different than, say, a character action game, where the key concept of the game is based on stylishly cool combos and weapon variety, like what Devil May Cry and Ninja Gaiden do. A character-coded game is one where the UI elements, representation of story themes through gameplay, and combat systems orbit around the identity of the game's primary character and the theming of the game itself. You're watching Rayl Deal Games, and Def Jam Fight for New York is among one of the most clear examples of character-coded game design I've ever seen, being right up there with the Batman Arkham games and things of that nature. In its main campaign, it is the player's created character that the game is coded around, and the hip-hop and rap culture of the late 90s and early 2000s. The core mechanics of the gameplay, high replayability, and story elements demonstrate this. If you liked the video today, consider sticking around. I make new gaming videos every Wednesday and Friday, and you may like my other and future work. With all of that established, let's dive right in. Late 90s and early 2000s rap and hip-hop harnesses hyper-speed lyricism and in-your-face attitude, denying common culture from ignoring it, something radio stations and media outlets successfully had done for decades until its explosion in popularity in the 80s. It's a heated rage against the machine of thus silenced voices, reaching a pitch that even the deaf could hear. Fight for New York conveys this aspect of the genre from this era, representing it via the core gameplay mechanics of its combat system. The most iconic Def Jam mechanic, blazing moves, demonstrates the solution with its snapshot freeze frames and bone-crunching sound design. Nearly every single one of these moves would be lethal in reality, but it's that unfiltered violence that makes Def Jam what it is. It's antithetical to the idealized vision of gaming many parents still maintain into the early 2000s. The idea that Nintendo was the primary power within the industry, something that hadn't actually been true for over a decade by that point. These climactic clashes of attitude, bone, and viscera function as one of the potential ways in which every conflict in Def Jam can resolve. Matches can also end with style-specific power attacks, such as top rope attacks and powerful grabs, weapon attacks, or through the use of the environment. You see, health in this game works quite differently from most other fighting games. Every single attack deals damage to the victim's total health pool, which is perfectly normal, but there's a secondary pool that overlaps upon the first that shows how much health the player is able to recover naturally over time. The only way to win a match is to KO the opponent while they are in the red, but this requires dealing consistent damage. Should the player be able to take control of a match and constantly deal damage the entire time, it's actually possible to win a fight without actually having reduced the opponent's health to any severe, significant degree. Blazing moves can win matches, but they are also particularly useful at decreasing both the overall health of the opponent and their regenerating pool. These blazing moves are showy by design, as the flashy nature of the attacks in conjunction with the sound design matches the showmanship of the hip-hop artists and rappers that make up most of the cast themselves. As such, the super meter is such an important mechanic, and building meter is done by successfully landing attacks upon the opponent. Getting hit reduces the meter, but this system actually has a not-so-secret layer to it. As the game progresses, several characters in the story will inform the player that they need to look good in order for the audience to cheer for them and back them up with assistance via crowd grabs and weapon drops. What's not specifically stated in regards to this is the fact that the amount of money the player spends on the way their character looks impacts the speed at which their super meter builds, allowing them to get multiple blazing moves in a single match. Because of the way the campaign plays out, this tricks the player somewhat into feeling like they are managing to fill the meter much faster as a direct result of the way they're playing the game. While this is hopefully true to some degree, as we all hope we're getting better at a game as we progress through it, the ostentatious arrogance of the player's bling is the actual cause of this effect. This gameplay mechanic directly relates to the perceived popularity of musicians as displayed by the wealth they flaunt. This is what I mean by character-coded game design, as this element of Def Jam's design is informed by the archetypal character of hip-hop artists and rappers, is gamified, and completely changes the core mechanics of the gameplay in a way that is entirely different than what came before or since throughout all of gaming history. This is not the full extent of the gameplay either, as there is a 2-layered counter system in Def Jam as well. Since there are 2 primary forms of attacks, blunt force attacks such as punches and kicks, and grabs, there are 2 different ways of countering attacks that create the chess-like mind games that embody all great fighting game frameworks. To counter a grab, the player needs to press an attack button at the same time they are grabbed. To counter a strike, the player needs to press the block button and any direction on the left analog stick just before the attack lands. Successfully parrying either type of attack allows the player an opportunity of counterattack. There's a learning curve to this though, as Def Jam is a harder game with a steeper learning curve than most, especially considering the fact that its mechanics are so different from anything else that existed at the time or even now. Starting out, it's quite possible that the player is going to get stuck in a Tsukuyomi of infinite jabs and grab loops.
Tsukuyomi.
But once the player gets the flow and feel of the gameplay down, they become an impenetrable wall of infinite reversals. If there's a critique I can levy against Fight for New York, it's that this particular aspect of the game's design sometimes leads to these combat interactions where both the player and AI are just countering each other, with neither being able to get the upper hand outside of the free hit they're provided upon parry success.
Use his momentum to counter.
Come now. You really think you're the only one who can play this game?
This core framework is remixed in the context of 2v2 and free-for-all fights. As the name suggests, 2v2 fights is a team-based mode, which sometimes forces the player to deal with 2 opponents at the same time, which is especially difficult when the player's partner is knocked out first. When the player is able to KO an opponent first though, the match turns into the player and their partner jumping their opponent, kicking their teeth in. Free-for-all fights are matches with 4 participants. The last man standing is the winner, and these contests are a nice change of pace in the main campaign. I personally loved ambushing fighters periodically as the other participants moshed and meleeed in a group of 3. This variety adds a ton to the campaign and demonstrates how the gameplay mechanics of Def Jam hold up under scrutiny. The real thing that makes fighting games so fun though is the skill-based nature of them, which in this particular case factors into the high replayability of Fight for New York. The biggest point of replayability Fight for New York has is the way the 5 styles in the game work. Essentially, the player chooses between wrestling, martial arts, street fighting, kickboxing, and submissions, picking one at the start of a campaign. As the campaign progresses, the player can spend their development points, a special form of currency earned by winning matches that is spent exclusively on styles, stats, and new blazing moves, to acquire 2 more styles that add on top of whatever their first style is. This means that there is a degree of difference between the multiple approaches the player can take during the development of their character. For example, I chose wrestling as my base style, picked up martial arts second, and finished my build with street fighting. This meant that I did most of my quick damage with swift strikes and kicks, usually ending matches with the heavy grabs given by wrestling. The wrestling style is also what I primarily used to win the hardest fight in the story mode, the 2v2 fight with Crack and Magic. This one fight is the one thing that might make me pause when considering a replay, because it is a severe difficulty spike. The player has to beat 2 of the most difficult opponents in the game at the same time, with a partner that is nearly unconscious as is. It took me several tries to figure out how to approach this fight. On my first attempt, I tried to solo Crack, and on my second, I tried to do the same with Magic, and neither of these worked because of the way each of these characters have incredibly slow grabs, which made it so that Blaze, the player's partner, would get KO'd as they put me in infinite grab loops. I flipped the script on my third idea for winning, which was to harry both Crack and Magic, to keep them off Blaze long enough for me to cinch a win. This almost worked, and with a little revision, my fourth strategy would end up working. In it, I cycled back and forth with back grabs, which do significant damage because of my wrestling style base. This allowed me to knock Crack out and isolate Magic for a simple 1v1. This approach did truly work like a charm, so it could be interesting to see how this match works without wrestling or without the exact combination of styles I ended up having. Beyond experimenting with new styles, Def Jam actually has trophies, well before such a thing would exist en masse in the gaming industry. These are on a wall in the player character's home, and many of these challenges beg the player to replay the campaign, such as the one which demands the player finish the campaign with an 80% win rate, which is just not happening on a first playthrough without save scumming. Mastery-based challenges such as this are always things that I'll support, and in general, I've always been a big fan of trophies. Trophies work with the theming of Def Jam as well because of the idolatry intrinsic to the opulence and artistic expression that is the core foundation of the game's character-coded mechanics. The way the story is told demonstrates this far better than anything else in the game though. On its surface, Def Jam has a pretty cliched story. The player's character teams up with D-Mod and is philosophically opposed to Snoop Dogg's character, Crow. Crow is a ruthless gang leader, whereas D-Mod espouses virtues such as loyalty and respect. This serves as the good and evil of the plot, and while this isn't anything special, what is unique about Fight for New York is the ways in which the plot points of the game impact gameplay, UI elements, and non-verbal storytelling. From the jump, the design of the character creator matches the crime drama genre of the story. The player gets to build the police's dossier on their character, which is such a cool framing device for a character creation toolkit. I always try to create myself when playing games with character creators for my first playthrough, and unfortunately for me, the character I created has a much more punchable face than I intended. That's what I'm going to say, at least, in the hopes that I don't actually have that snide, smug, stuck-up stink face all the time. In terms of UI elements, the culture of the early 2000s is represented with the sliding mobile phone that the player uses to read texts and to listen to voicemails, which is where a lot of the game's storytelling happens in between fights. Before and after matches, the player character and their opponent talk smack to one another, which directly connects to the genre of music the game's character-coded identity is founded upon. These things are sometimes hilarious, and my favorite one is absolutely the deranged and feral one spoken by Redman's character, Doc.
I'm gonna take your tongue out and lick my ass with it.
In terms of gameplay, the first moment that stands out to me is when the player has to fight Danny Trejo in the subway. When I played this part, I quickly pushed Trejo into the railway tracks and hit him with a slow-running blazing move. During the move, I heard what I thought sounded like a train inbound, so I got the heck out of there just in time, leaving Trejo to be splattered against the grime and filth of the NYC subway system. This sort of added environmental hazard is something that happens again near the end of the game, as we'll discuss shortly, and demonstrates the brutality of gangland conflicts over territory. Money is the breeding ground for all the ills of mankind, after all. After the player has won most of the NYC nightclubs from Crow, Crow attempts to get the player's character to betray D-Mod and come to work for him instead. However, the player character turns him down. This scene, which I unfortunately didn't record, is fairly cliched. However, there is an interesting element in it. You see, the player character gets a girlfriend fairly early on in the game, and in this scene she is present. Initially, Crow requests the player character to send her away, but he doesn't, which implies that they have a deep, personal, and close relationship. This is why Crow exploits their relationship and blackmails the player by abducting her and threatening to kill her. This turns the player's character heel, and this is where some of the most fascinating nonverbal storytelling and UI elements are implemented. The first thing I noticed in this part of the story is how the player's character no longer talks smack in the pre-fight banter between themselves and their opponent. This is significant because it shows how the player's character doesn't want to do what they're doing. In addition to this, the player's health bar switches sides. Normally, the player's health bar is on the top left, the place that is typically associated with the first player's location in video game UI. However, once the player is used as a tool for the antagonist, they view themselves as the bad guy, changing the location of their health bar to the top right, which is the place where the player's opponent's health bar historically has been placed. This is a subtle bit of characterization and storytelling that implies how the character, and by extension the player, feels about themselves in this particular part of the plot. They view themselves as the villain because that's what they are, because they are actively blaspheming against the story's theme. Once the player redeems themselves in the 2v2 fight with Crack and Magic, their health bar returns to the top left, demonstrating the character's change in self-concept and perceived status as the hero of the story. Additionally, the player character doesn't gloat over the people they defeat. Instead, he looks down at his defeated foes, his former friends and compatriots, with a blend of remorse and pity. All of these elements drive the emotional weight of this particular part of the story and the theme of loyalty matters above all else home. The story impacts the final 3 matches of the game. I've already discussed the 2v2 match with Crack and Magic, but right after this one, the player character has to save their girl from a burning building, set alight by Sticky Fingers because of his envy caused by Dmod favoring the player's character over him earlier in the plot. This fight ends with immolation, and the ring of fire framing the fight does damage over time to whoever steps or is thrown into it. When in the red, this leads to an instant KO, and curveballs such as this are always nice additions to any fighting game campaign. The final fight is against Snoop Dogg's character Crow, and this fight starts with the player character's maximum health being decreased by roughly 25% because of how Crow stabs the player in the preceding cutscene. This arena also has an instant death mechanic, just like the trail fight in the subway. If a glass pane is damaged 3 times, it'll break, leading to whichever fighter that was used to break it being lined in chalk in the streets below. On my first attempt, I used Crow to crack the glass twice, but that low down, Snoopy dirty dog used me to break it the 3rd time, making me lose. On my second attempt, I just shoved his head into the wall to win, causing a bit of dissonance between how the fight played out for me and the following cutscene, which depicts Crow's crumpled corpse on the concrete below. As the player's character stares out at New York, reflecting upon their conquest of the city, Def Jam Fight for New York ends, and as such, it's time for me to finish this video the same way I do each of my reviews, by answering the question, will this game make my top 100 for the decade of its release? Def Jam Fight for New York will be making my top 100 of the 2000s list in the blue category, kicking Destroy All Humans 2, a childhood favorite, to the curb. This means that it'll be in the first round of cuts whenever I need to add something else to the list. Def Jam is a great example of character-coded game design, as the gameplay mechanics, build variety and story conveyance, add characterization to the game's design itself. And that's the video, guys. What do you think of Fight for New York? Let's discuss in the comments below. This analysis is the product of my community asking for me to review this game. I posted a poll yesterday asking which requested game I should cover next, so make sure you go over to the community tab to vote on that right after finishing this video. And if there's something you'd like to see added to the poll next time, let me know in the comment section under any of my videos. If you all liked this video, consider smashing that like button, subscribing, and ringing the notification bell. Hyping up the video would be a great help, as it would ensure more people will be able to see it. Regardless of what you choose to do, thank you for keeping it real with Rayl Deal Games. Have a great day, dudes.